Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight. We are joined by Cynthia Jamileth and Nicolle LaMere, our two artists in residence for the spring 2022 artists residency at the Printing Museum here in Houston, Texas. And tonight they're going to be talking about some of the work that they've completed during their residency. The Printing Museum is in Houston and we are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. So we are very excited about that. My virtual background is our current building space. We are going to be moving to Midtown in over the summer of 2022. So our new address will be 3121 San Jacinto. And I hope you guys all follow us on social media and our newsletter so that you can keep abreast of our move, how it's going, and visit us in the new location when we reopen. We have summer workshops happening virtually. And we also have a visiting guest artist, Rich Dana, who's going to be doing a pre-Xerox technology copier workshop coming up on June 18th. So those are the kind of upcoming events that we have at the Printing Museum that I just wanted to let you all know about. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our artists in residence. But first, I wanted to thank them for their time at the Printing Museum and also bearing with us as we've been preparing for this move, that things have been a little bit up in the air. And so thank you. We've loved having you as part of our residency. You are our fourth cohort. We've been excited to be able to offer this program since fall of 2020. So going first tonight, our first artist is Cynthia Jamileth, who will be sharing her screen and telling us more. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Jamileth. I will be sharing my screen now. Let's see. Okay, now I'm sharing. Okay, so I made a really quick, simple presentation about the work I've done at the Printing Museum. I was surprised at how much I did stick to my original idea of what I wanted to do. I know that when you make proposals, they always kind of change a little bit, but I knew I wanted to do two major projects. And one of them was a paper banner, and I included these images so you can have an idea of what it is. It's those like party or birthday banners, triangular in shape. I've always been very interested in paper making, and I finally had the opportunity to learn how to make my own paper with Kathy, and that was an amazing experience. I made some Abaca paper. I absolutely loved it. It was very intuitive and very relaxing in a way, and the paper is just so beautiful. But I knew I wanted to make a paper banner. I have been interested in language specifically. I'm bilingual, I'm first generation American. So I knew I wanted to make some banners with words that are words that I grew up hearing to kind of celebrate them. And that's why I wanted to pick something that was celebratory in a way. So this next slide, it has a word, caliche, which means it's kind of hard to define. So I use this very great website that defines it. It's a jargon set of words used by Salvadorians, and they're sometimes perfectly understandable among those in the community. So even for me, I am kind of an outsider in that my family uses these words and I am familiar with them, but they kind of have their own meaning in each family. So I knew I wanted to use some caliche words because they're very specific to where my parents are from, but they're still kind of overall understood by anyone who speaks Spanish. But the word caliche is something that is very specific to El Salvador. So they're words that have almost double meaning most of the time. So I included a few of them, and here there's a few very well-known ones, and I did use a few of them. And I was when I was making this slideshow, I was realizing that I used a lot of the feminine version of them. A lot of them have both feminine and masculine, so I use more of the feminine words when I printed them. So there's just a few. There's chero, cipote, bayunco, polado, cachimbon, and I'll leave these on there if you want to read them. I am a big word nerd. I'm really interested in language, so this was like really exciting for me to be able to do some more research. I haven't done language research since grad school, and it's funny that coincidentally my grandfather came back from El Salvador just a few months ago, so I got to hear a lot of these words while he was here visiting, and I hadn't seen him in about 10 years, so it was really nice to hear them and just get their full meaning from him and from my family speaking them. And this next slide, my other big project, which I will show you, I'm just showing you a little bit of background right now. I knew I wanted to make a game, a board game, so an artist book that is a game. And I've done an artist book that is a game, but a very small version of it. So I wanted to do something bigger, and I wanted to actually make game pieces and have it relate to the words that are printed in the paper banners. So these are just some pictures that I took inspiration from while I was thinking of how am I going to make this board game and how is it going to function. So the big one for me was I realized how much I was inspired by Candyland and just this trail that you follow, and then the game pieces. So you'll see the pieces that I've made. This is the game that I made just spread out. So I used this paper, well, I didn't use this paper folding because I made it out of bookboard, but it's the snake fold, if you're familiar with that. So it folds down. I can actually show you guys. It folds down really nice into this square, and you unfold it and it unfolds into that game. And while I was making it, I tried to think of how I could have it still relate to the work that I make. I'm a painter, so I was looking at my work, and even my family pointed out that I had a lot of stars in the work. So I thought of having the stars be this marker. So let me go to the next slide. This is some more shots of it. I was debating on what I would use to bind the book board. I was originally thinking I would get some book cloth and paint on it, but then I found this amazing black holographic fabric that from far away looks very just normal, but in certain light, it's very magical. So I knew I had to use it, and it was just perfect for what I wanted. And then from there, I thought I need to make some game pieces. So I made my own game pieces. I even made my own dice. And I did some research, and dice were originally made from human fingers. But I made mine out of clay, and I actually have those to show you guys because as I was telling Nicolle and Adrienne, I feel like the pieces are so much better in person. So I'm just going to show you guys the little game pieces I made. So the game works. You unfold the whole board game, and you have your little game pieces and your dice, and you roll the dice. And every time you land on a star, you will go to one of the words that are printed in the paper banner, which I will be showing in the next few slides. This is just the pawns again. So I wanted to have a way to have non-Spanish speakers understand the words. So I made paper fortune tellers. And when you land on the rules of the game, I guess, are when you land on a star, you go to one of the words and then you find the definition for it. So for each one, it kind of has a corresponding color, which you can't really see in this light, but they correspond with the color of the banner. And from there, you'll get the definition of if, as you see on the screen right now, cipota means child, teen, or young lady, because this is the feminine pronoun. Or the bottom word, chichipata, a woman who drinks or is drunk. And then the next one, muñeca, doll or wrist, and then bayunca, which was the word that kind of started it all for me because I remember hearing it a lot. Silly, dumb, stupid, or childish. A lot of these words are they're adjectives, they describe someone. So here's just some more pictures of the paper fortune tellers that I made and then actually used the Rezo machine to make copies of them. That was my first time using that. That was really exciting. And then I just went and did some hand drawing on them. I always want to have this combination of printmaking and then still the drawing aspect of it. So for the paper banners, I actually use the press that is kind of doesn't work properly. And I use magnets to keep everything in place. So I would roll the color on this block that I'm showing and then put the handmade paper on top and get the color on there. And then for the words, this was really exciting and playful for me. Was I got to use magnets to hold everything in place. And as soon as I saw that, I just knew that that was how I was going to print stuff. So I would pick out my words. I picked the font there was so many different fonts. It was amazing. It was just so much to choose from, but this very rounded font seemed very playful. And that's what I went with. So I would put the words down, keep them there with magnets, and then print on the handmade paper banners that were already colored. And this is half of them. And I actually have them here with me. And what I ended up doing was keeping some of the paper white because it's just so beautiful. It's so thin and delicate, but still very strong. So I did the words with the letterpress, and I actually did a relief carving for the star, and then just used this rainbow paper that I have been dying to use. So that's some of the words. I'm just going to show you guys on screen some of them. And I enjoyed using the ink in a very transparent way. I love how delicate and strong these are. So this is how I would present them, string together, and there's about 16 of them. So this is half of them, and they each have a color that corresponds with the paper fortune teller. So just some more close-up shots of these. And I initially thought I would just have them individually, maybe just to get on their own, but I think they're so much more fun all together. And then the last piece that I made, which was inspired by the work I did, was a painting, which I have with me. I had a lot of leftover paper that I had kind of test printed on, and I knew I wanted to use that to make a painting or drawing. So I picked the one with the word chichipata, which means a drunk woman or a woman who drinks. And it's a word that my mom uses all the time. Whenever I tell her I'm having some wine, she just will call me that word. It has a negative connotation, but she means it in a very playful way. So I use that, and I wanted to have the bottle there. I even included the dice that I made in the drawing, and I kept the printed word. There's a few other words that you can kind of see here and here. And then I use the same rainbow paper again, just to really connect all the different aspects I made, because this is the first time I've made very object-based work, which is very different from what I normally make. So I was really surprised that I ended up making nothing that was really 2D. Everything was kind of physical. But yeah, I think that these are just some close-up shots of the last painting, but that is all I have. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
And Cynthia, when you're done sharing your screen, close that out and then your screen will be larger. If you
Okay.
share your objects again on screen so that people can
Oh,
see
yeah.
them more clearly.
Okay, so this is the board game. Like I said, it folds down very nicely. And like I said, it looks very just normal, but in certain light, you can see the magical fabric that this is. So it unfolds, it's a snake fold. And normally this is done with one sheet of paper that you cut into the folds, but I wanted this to be very, I guess, durable and withstand like a board game does. So I did it individually and wrapped each piece, and then I did the drawings beforehand and then just assembled it. It took very long. I had never done this type of configuration for a game or artist book, so this was a new experience for me. It was pretty stressful the first time I actually editioned this. One is for the museum, so that was really nice that I got to make a kind of test one and then this really nice one. Because it inevitably with artist books, something always goes wrong. I had everything ready and then I started gluing and I'm like, this is not working. But the second time, the editioned one is beautiful. And these are some of the pawns or the game pieces that you would play with. And as I mentioned, I made my own dice. So you roll the dice, you have your little game piece, and every time that you land on a star, you go to the paper fortune teller and you have it tell you the definition of a word. So I actually played it with a friend of mine actually over a Zoom call last week to kind of test it out, and he was able to guess some of the words. So I was very excited. He's a non-Spanish speaker, so I was very excited that the game made sense and that he was able to learn some words that are caliche from El Salvador. And I have the painting, which I think looks better in person, or maybe not in here, but here it is. And I was thinking I wanted to connect it to everything I've made. So I even like the dice is the same. I haven't made a proper painting since December. So I was very happy that this kind of inspired me to make another painting. But yeah, those are the pieces, and again, the paper banners, which I can't wait to make more handmade paper. It's so beautiful, and it just made me appreciate paper even more. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
And the type that you were using, did you also find type with the accented characters like the Enya?
I did not. So I made I just added it after. I know Jessica mentioned there was a few, but I really like this type and I just kind of added it afterward.
That's a great solution.
I was just surprised that there was some type with the Enya.
This is Jessica. We have a few pieces, but not like you said in that really fun rounded inline type that you liked so well. I thought about trying to see if we could like kind of make some after the fact or carve some or do things like that, because you're actually the second person who would have benefited from diacritic marks for their type. So yeah.
I think Houston being such a diverse city as well, I think it would make sense for the printing museum to have type of that nature. So if you guys know of anyone that has any type like that too, or if we make our own, we'll keep you all posted.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to make our own.
Which would be, yeah, which is an interesting solution too, getting to craft new type.
Yeah.
Well, keep
Lasers.
keep questions in mind too, everybody, and we'll have time at the end for the questions. And I forgot to mention at the top of our intros that we will also be, once we are in our new space, having a show of our artists in residence work, so that you can see the physical objects and appreciate them, you know, in person, as they're better meant to be appreciated. So also stay tuned for that. So I will hand it over to Nicolle, who will be going next and telling you about her work.
Hi. Great. So I'm going to start off by making sure everyone can see this. Okay. Yes. Can people see that?
Yes.
Yes, you're good.
Great. Thank you. So yes, I am Nicolle LaMere. And with any talk or any chance I can get, I'd always like to start with gratitude. So of course, big thanks to the Printing Museum. I worked really closely with Jessica Snow and Kathy Gerwell during this entire process, and their wealth of knowledge and support allowed me to really thrive in this environment. Texas Tech University, University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, where I actually had a printmaking secondary and learned almost everything I know from Max White. So she's really set the foundations for me. And I was also so lucky to be able to attend a spring concentration at Penland School of Crafts, where I learned almost everything I know. Now Jessica's also added to that knowledge, but my initial letterpress printing instructors, teachers, mentors were Rory Sparks and Kyle Dury. And so that class was all about animated letterpress, and it got me really excited about using the Vandercook printing press to make things go, make things move. And of course, friends and family, I rely on them quite a bit, and I'm always so grateful to have them. I hope they're grateful to have me some days. But okay, so prior to my residency at the Printing Museum, I was at the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft for 11 months. And I began March 2020. So right at the onset of the pandemic, things changed quite rapidly. And it also made me think about my work in somewhat different perspectives. So this is a sample of what I made in that residency. This is 100% clay. And one thing I want to really highlight is this sort of like porcelain wall of this vessel. It's very paper-like, and this sort of like mottled light is what really made me excited about learning more about paper and how to make paper, and specifically for my upcoming projects, casting paper. I do have a background in mold making, so it was really great to try and augment that for the paper process. This piece in general, I was struggling at the time deciding, as a person, as an artist, like how much control to exert onto my work, how much control do we have over our lives. And so one of the key phrases that the ceramic community likes to coin is embrace the crack. And so this vessel, I really was at odds and really had to learn to find the beauty in this crack. These vessels, I feel as though they are embodying light, and that idea of really looking at my relationship with light, and specifically here, light streaming in through a window. This is covered in an acetate, so it's not just plain glass, but frosted. So the quality of light and how that affects things in space, how that affects our daily lives. We've all spent a lot of time indoors, and I really do feel as though a connection to the out of doors is key to understanding who we are as humans. So light has been core to this project. So I'm trained as a ceramic sculptor and printmaker. So I have been focusing on prints in space. So here's like a rough sketch out from my sketchbook. So the plan, what I applied to do and what I've been working on since, is to make a stop motion animation with the Vandercook printing press, which would then be digitally captured and projected onto the floor of the gallery space, and some of which would be projected onto large, voluminous paper cast pillows. So, youtube.com. Okay. For those who haven't been able to sneak back and see the printing studio, this is where I've spent so much time. So here you see that these are the Vandercook presses. There's one more right here, which I haven't been able to capture. This is utilizing an app called Polycam. I'm also working on another photogrammetry model using Mushroom and Blender. However, my tablet keeps crashing, so it's not quite done yet. But here, this is the press that Cynthia has been using, and this is the press that I have primarily been using. And so we're all like in this really wonderful space. And unfortunately, since the museum is closed, this is now perhaps the only way that some might be able to experience that. Which is bittersweet. But here, this is an example of a past animation I made while at Penland. So this is just a little tiny magnet, actually, which is sitting on a metallic base. And then the paper is fed through the Vandercook press and then prints this little O. And because it's a magnet, I can just tweak it. So I'm making these little tiny micro movements, and then it forms this movement when it's all stitched together. All right, so this is another example of this utilizes type and pressure printing. I didn't use type this time, but if you are interested in learning more about how type appears, like in terms of like how to lock it up or how to organize type on a Vandercook press, I would love to recommend take a look at Oscar Maynard or at Tender Heart Press, who was a former cohort. I think it was the fall.
Yes, the previous one.
It's like, oh, I don't know. But on their Instagram, they like have videos of like how to put letters together. And if you're really curious about that, please check that out there. But what I wanted to highlight specifically with this was the little pinwheels. So those are all paper cut elements, which I am using like an easy stick glue stick to glue onto a piece of paper and then roll that through the press. So this allows me to pick up, peel, twist, move, all of these little tiny movements. And the goal for me was to have this sort of like explosive energy, like the wind is blowing or breath is blowing these pinwheels out into space. And so I really wanted to try to capture that essence of movement with this project. But of course, when I'm thinking about light entering into the room through a window pane, first I have to ask myself, what does the shadow look like? Of course, when we look at the plant, we see the leaves and the branches, but that's not really what the shadow appears to be. Because we're dealing with space and diffusion, we end up with like these really abstract blob shapes. And I learned a lot about how shadows interact with space, how they move. Some key elements that I learned that I would have to keep in mind in terms of printing was that when we see a shadow, there is intensity. So if a cloud is passing overhead, the light surrounding it becomes duller. Perhaps it's not as bright. The outlines of the shadows are not as crisp. The wind will blow this branch. And what I thought was so interesting is when it blows a branch back, there's this moment where it pushes forward and then flings back once more. I've spent so much time looking at treetops in the wind and shadows, and I am really grateful for this project forcing me or encouraging me to pay so close attention. And just that is a great change of lifestyle. But here you can see that I'm starting to cut out these portions of drawings. I mentioned this on a post earlier, but at first I was really confused. I didn't know if I had drawn it incorrectly or if this really made any sense whatsoever. And then once I started putting these together, I noticed that it reminded me of camouflage. So I must have been on the right track. So animations, there's many different ways to go about this, but for a fluid movement, you want to have at least 24 frames per second. And so as you can see on the little handwritten note on this paper, it's 485 individual prints. And so that is roughly 20 seconds. Now, it would take me at least an hour to print 100. And that's because each print is running through at least 2 to 3 times. And I'm moving these little bits of paper every single time. So this is where I hung out quite a bit. Here you can see the fat stack that I had to print. And here, this is my sort of printing block. So this is a piece of melamine with small foam squares on it. They're sort of like used a lot in scrapbooking or in that same like squishy foam material that you might see in children's toys, especially like bath toys. It's supposed to be, it's super easy to cut. And I really wanted to sort of not destroy, but like smooth the corners, the edges of these little squares, because again, when light is diffused, it's not necessarily going to be sharp. So for me, it was a really great opportunity to play with material. So here are these little printed blocks. And then you can sort of see the outline here. That is the pressure from this paper cut piece. So it's the paper with the paper cut piece, and then the print that you want to print, and then that's fed through the press. So it only ever gets ink on the part you're intending. So once I've printed all of these things, of course, when I'm thinking about like, okay, so if I have all these elements in real life, you know, wind, light, or intensity, I should say, how am I going to sort of like make variables in the printing process in order to mimic these changes in light and shadow? And so I have used a very transparent yellow ink, and at times I'm adding violet to make it seem duller or darker. I might use a lot of ink on one or like 20 prints, and then all of a sudden there's like hardly any ink left, but I keep printing because I want it to be light and airy rather than bold and intense. So one thing I also wanted to mention is I learned a lot about this foam material. There are particular adhesives that basically eat away the back of this foam, and then that leaves this sort of mottled effect, which at first I was shocked. And if anyone knows me, you could probably guess that I was taken aback. But I really learned to love it. And after printing, that tone really evened out and I missed it. So I think that was something really surprising and really lovely about the process. But this is photographed. So I wanted to make sure that people can see this like really soft, grainy texture. And then you have this mottled look. So this print has been sent through twice. Once just printing the 6 blocks, and then once again with the paper piece pressure printing. Now, variations, right? So here, this was about the first 200 prints or so. I printed it in one day, and if you note, there's like this almost green appearance to it. That is because we are in a community studio space and there was some black residue left on the press, and therefore it's turned out a little green. But you know what? That's also another moment where the process is making itself visible. So it's not necessarily what I had intended, but in the end, I really do appreciate it. And here, this is farther in the printing process. Here we have a print that's been run through 3 times. So once for the blocks, once for this larger connected stencil, and then there are some smaller paper cut elements that I'm also moving about. And here again, just looking at this like really beautiful mottled surface. The interesting thing about this foam as well is it acted sort of like a sponge. So here we have this like this shape that continues to happen due to the fact that this is where the paper pressure printing is primarily taking up ink. So the edges where I don't have any pressure printing happening, it's soaking up more and more ink every single time the rollers pass over it. So here we have like this really intense color that builds up. Oh, so one more thing. So note how this is greeny, right? So this has been photographed. This is the exact same print, but it's been run through a scanner. So even the process of digitizing these prints also will change what the final image looks like. So this is, some would say blown out, but it's very bright. It appears more yellow. you lose some of that fine grain appearance. And it's something I learned from, and this I knew was gonna happen. So I have processed, with the help of a friend, thank you, Zane, 5 seconds of the 20. So here you can sort of see the way things skitter and jump. The large movements, that is me moving the paper, piecing quite a bit. These little tiny movements, perhaps I'm just wiggling them back and forth. I'm gonna do just a little bit more. No, not that. But again, some of the joys about doing animated letterpress is that you don't really know what it's going to look like in the end until you animate it. And this is, again, going to go through another transformation because it is intended to be projected onto the floor. So here we're seeing this through a screen. We have a much different experience of it than when it's going to enter into the gallery space. So I'm going to exit out of that and come back to the slideshow. Okay. So again, yes, we know. So I am still learning quite a bit about this portion of the installation, but I feel really good about it, and I'm sure I'm going to learn quite a bit more as I move forward with that process. And now I want to talk a little bit about these pillows. So I spent a lot of time at the very beginning with Kathy. I, again, am a mold maker. And so I knew that I wouldn't have time to make the pillow mold right away. The best mold to use is one that has cured completely and dried naturally. I am a stickler about that. I believe that you shouldn't fan dry or put it in an oven or put it in a kiln. You should really just let the plaster dry on its own. So I brought in a mold I had previously made back in 2016. It was designed for clay. So I really paid a lot of attention about undercuts, which are areas in which something would get caught underneath, and then when you try to take it out, it would rip. So here it's designed to come apart. There shouldn't be any areas in which paper or clay or anything should really be caught. So here's just an image of the paper studio. And this is a bird's eye view. So here I have half of my 8-part mold as a test. And what you're really looking for is this really tiny shadow that forms in between the paper and the mold. And that's an indication that the mold is ready to come out. Here you can see some of the area that is exposed. So didn't have enough paper to complete this one. But this is what the piece looks like popped out, right? So here you see those valleys that the paper has been hand pressed into. And this is a piece that Kathy and I actually worked on together. So Kathy here, and then me where it's falling apart, right? All over here. So one of the things that, again, I'm trying to capture is that sort of like mottled light that comes through the material, much like my ceramic work. But I am learning a lot about paper and what it can and cannot do. This obviously is structurally sound, and this is not. But I like the appearance of this a lot better, especially if I'm thinking about the way the letter press printed light prints are going to be projected on the ground and on these paper pieces. That's supposed to be a modeled light. This is going to be modeled. So I haven't finished this portion yet. I have, however, started to make the mold. So here we have a pillow that I love. It does still bring me comfort and I love it. So it's wrapped in plastic. That does really alter what the mold will look like in the end, and I'll show you in just a moment. But if you're curious, this is a method called frosting. It's where you wait for the plaster to sort of firm up to the point where you can just frost it like a cake. So here I'm just like smoothing the plaster over the surface of the pillow. And then here is just a simple shot of what the mold, the usable side of the mold actually looks like. So here you can sort of see some of that really beautiful crocheted texture. But because I'm obsessive, I can also see the way this sort of like dips in is an indication of plastic. so I am probably going to shortly process some paper and paper pulp, I should say, and cast one of these just to see what it looks like in paper, but I might be remaking this mold. Or I just need to let it go. Okay, so thanks. I had a really good time. There were some growing pains, but that's what we need. That's what I need to keep going and keep being curious. If you would like to see some of my finished work, feel free to check out my website. And then on my Instagram, Nicolle_LaMere, that's where I've been putting a lot of process shots. So if you're interested in more of an in-depth step-by-step visual explanation of what's going on or what I'm doing, please feel free to check that out. And this was a shot that Gabby caught of me. Again, this is what we look like when we make art. But yeah, it was great. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicolle. I especially love that last shot. It's so often that we forget to get photos of ourselves, you know, as the process happens. And so
Yeah.
that's a great photo. So I put those in the chat as well and accidentally hit the mute button. So check those out, follow them on Instagram. If you guys have any questions, we have some time for that too. So I know you've probably got questions or comments or just things that you noticed. If there's anything else you want them to expand on, now is the time. Feel free to unmute, or if you're shy, that's all right. Put your questions in the chat and I'm happy to read them out.
Hey, Nicolle, this is Jess. Is that particular pillow like, what's stopping you from buying another knitted pillow and just ruining that one? Or is it symbolic and you really want to capture the symbolic symbolism of an actual pillow that comforts you?
That's a great question. I haven't thought much about it. I haven't thought about it to that extent. I suppose once something enters into your intimate living space, I mean, if I'm resting my head on this at night, that's not necessarily something I would want to destroy.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that it's not necessarily my pillow, but the idea of a pillow. So it could be anyone's comfort space. So I could
Yeah.
buy another pillow and destroy that one.
Or have a friend knit one for you.
That's a precious thing. That is.
It's still a thing. It's just a thing. I have a knitting machine.
Oh, okay. So are
we'll
you
just-
gonna make me a pillow then?
Yeah,
that-
maybe we should just we can bust you out a knitted pillow. So
That's
you
what it
can,
sounds like.
yeah, I guess I just volunteered.
Yes, you did.
It's caught live on camera. I was thinking, because yeah, I agree, like the actual knitted texture of something without the plastic in between. I feel you on trying to capture that for sure.
Yeah. That's one of those moments in an artistic practice where you look at it and you think, I know better. I know better, but I tried it anyways. But yes.
And I love the comment in the chat. Think of all the permanent pillows you would have. Cynthia, I'm curious about that interesting book cloth that you found. Just as a bookbinder myself, I haven't seen book cloth like that. And so is it fabric or is it kind of plasticated? How was it working with that material? Because that looked like a challenging material.
It is vinyl, so it is wonderful if you're gluing flat, which immediately as soon as I started binding the corners, I realized this needs special glue. And I had to go try, I don't even know how many types of glue, because when I glued the flat part, it was perfect. I was like, oh, this is great. It's working out exactly how I want. But as soon as I started doing the flaps, it all just went wrong. And I just started freaking out. I'm like, why isn't it working? It's not gluing. I'm using PVH. I'm using every, book binding glue that I know, and none of them worked, because this is on the inside, it is a fabric, but on the outside it's plastic. So when it comes to getting corners, it was a nightmare. But
yeah, I imagine that would be.
Yeah, it was a combination of a few different, I used a little bit of tacks to kind of hold it in place, and then I was just there holding it while it dried.
Okay.
But the material itself was worth the nightmare that it was to glue, because I love it so much.
It is
What
fantastic.
were your hinges made out of? It's got to hold up to like opening and closing a ton of times, right?
Made of the same material. Yeah, it's the same material, and I just cut strips and just hinged in between, because it is a very flexible but strong material. So I just wanted it to be cohesive, and I knew it would glue since it was flat, so I just went with that.
Cynthia, I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
I am really interested in the idea of this game board being so transportable, and the idea about language and how language sort of moves in space. I guess I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about why you chose language to be like the primary focus, or
Yeah. So I've had language and words in Spanish kind of creeping into my work since grad school. They were always kind of there. I would use them in the titles, and then during the pandemic, I started using the words in my drawings and paintings. So for this, since there was a letterpress, I could use type and just really go with language, make it really simple, because I feel like my work sometimes gets very complicated. I feel like I need to have every single element and color to make it a complete drawing or painting. But when it came to language, it was very simple and straightforward. And I picked very specific words that were caliche words. and how they're very playful and how it relates to learning. And with games, a lot of my artist books are games, and they're all kind of educational in a way. They're kind of teaching you something about my personal experience and these nostalgic words. So yeah, language, I couldn't get away from it. I've done a book previously relating English, Spanish, and then Arab-based words, where in grad school I did a research project on Spanish and how it's connected to the Arab language. So that was my first kind of language book, and that was a card game. So for this one, I wanted to connect the banners with the game and have it, like you said, be this portable thing, because I think that portable games are the funnest games to play because you can take them everywhere. And I would love to have my family actually play this game.
Can you explain a little bit more how the banner integrates with your game? Like, yeah.
Yeah. So the banner has the words, and every time you land on the star, you would go to the paper fortune teller and it would give you the definition of one of those words on the banner.
And then I know you and I talked about this, but I thought it might be interesting. Other people might find it interesting why you decided to letterpress print the color on your banner as opposed to dyeing the paper. I thought that was a interesting discussion that other people might enjoy.
Yes, I've never made paper, and I've never used ink for paper. So instead of dyeing it, which Kathy told me that the paper wouldn't be as vibrant, and I wanted a very vibrant but transparent color. So I chose to letterpress the color on there, and just also to get a little bit more experience and time with the letterpress, which I've never used. So I chose to do that instead. And that way I had a lot of control over what color I got to pick. I picked from the Pantone colors, and I mixed the color to try to match it as closely as possible to the colors I wanted. And if you made the paper a certain color, it wouldn't be as vibrant. And since I'm very new to paper making, it would probably not turn out exactly the color I wanted.
I was impressed with how well, like at least from on the screen, it looks like the paper is dyed. Like you didn't over ink the paper at all. You let it just be a very light application of ink.
Yeah, it was that. Those are the really nice ones. I think I made like 60 banners, and out of there, not even half were good enough. But it was an experience learning how to put the right amount of ink. I have some experience in printmaking, but it was very different using handmade paper, because I had to use a paper on top to kind of give it enough pressure, not too much, and just getting the ink the right consistency to make sure it wasn't over inked, because I still wanted that very airy, breathable, very delicate look. And you can't really see it in the pictures, but the paper almost has like this, not a glitter, but it's like a satin finish that the Abaca paper has. And I didn't want to cover that up with opaque ink.
Mm-hmm. Well, the application, yeah, I think you got the application just right for sure. Nicolle, I got to see you printing quite a bit, and it's very cool to see like what that animation is gonna like projected to be like, and getting to see how that light moves across it. Was really interesting, at least for me, because I got to actually watch you print and then to see like this iteration. So this will live as prints and as an animation and then as a projection, correct? All three will be okay.
And I'm also hoping to make a flip book.
Oh, that's
out
right.
of the like printed images, not printed with the press, but printed at FedEx. but, so that people can flip through at the museum and sort of like also understand the way we started learning about like moving image as another way to interact.
Someone's asking about your background.
Yeah.
Oh, it's clay. So this is it's just an image from an older piece, but these are just like little tiny ceramic vessels. They're made by rolling little balls of paper and then dipping them into liquid clay. So this texture is a paper texture, but it'll survive a millennia.
And then what did you do with those?
This is a part of a very specific ritual, actually, which I don't know if we have time to talk about it.
Got it.
At this
Fair.
point. But there's more about it on my website, so feel free to stop by.
Perfect. Perfect.
Great segue. Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone's time tonight. We've reached the hour. So thank you. Thank you to our artists, Cynthia and Nicolle. Thank you everyone for joining us. It was wonderful seeing the works that you made use of, all of the printing museum studios, which is what we love to see, and why we started the artist residency program was to share the bookbindery, the letterpress studio and type collections, the printmaking and paper making with more people. So we love for these spaces to be used. We look forward to reopening in our new space in Midtown later in 2022. So we hope you'll join us. Stay tuned for that. Do follow us. Our new location will be 3121 San Jacinto. And so thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.